So I grew up in a family with a single mother on welfare who had 3 kids. And it was tough. We grew up with very little. And a part of my growing up involved dealing with various boyfriends that my mom had. And that came with its own challenges. There is a little bit of physical abuse and a little bit of verbal abuse and also just plain being ignored, that kind of stuff. And yeah, it was painful. And also not having a father. So I grew up without a father. That was also painful. So when I was 6 years old, I would go to bed and I would be crying, I want my dad, I want my dad. And when I finally did meet my dad at the age of 6, I was disappointed because he was basically a homeless guy who was also an alcoholic, and he smelled terrible and looked terrible, and it was a disappointment, and it left me just thinking, okay, I don't need a dad anymore. And there was a few other men that came into my life that were challenging but also had their benefits. Some of them mentored me, some of them taught me things, although they were not perfect people, drug addicts, that kind of stuff. So growing up like that was tough. And, I didn't get a lot of encouragement. And in grade 2, I was in a class that was a grade 2 and 3 split. And I couldn't keep up with the kids in grade 3. I couldn't keep up with the teacher's task, what she asked us to do. And I started to cry in class. And in that moment, I pretended that it was a stomach ache, by the way. But in that moment, I stopped believing in myself. I was grade 2, so what is that, 8 years old? In that moment, I decided I wasn't smart. And I really stopped believing in myself. And it happened so fast, and I didn't even think about it. And from then on, my grades were terrible. All the way up until grade 8, I must have had like 50% marks. I remember getting a 30% in one class, and I still have my report cards to prove how bad it was. But basically after that, I couldn't take myself seriously. And I didn't pay attention. I wasn't able to pay attention. And there was one teacher who got me inspired in grade 4. She was a student teacher, Miss Cacao. And she did make a huge impact on me to help. She encouraged me. She looked at my work and said, how good it was. And I was inspired to work and do good at that time. But the rest of it was pretty bad. Then in grade 6, I wasn't able to afford the brand name clothing that my friends were all wearing. And I was the poorest kid in my group. And I was bullied heavily. And even though I was in the group of friends, I was still the one that they picked on all the time for entertainment. And this might be where I can bring up the first principle that I learned. Well, yeah, let's go there. So I was bullied for at least a year straight until I finally stopped trying to fit in with them. There was a day, and when I say bullied, I mean they whipped me with belts. They ripped my brand new sweaters that I bought to try to fit in. They were throwing jawbreakers at me one day. They put a toy car in a pillow and hit me with it over the head during a pillow fight. And it was mainly instigated just by one guy, but everybody else sort of got on board. So But the day that they were throwing jawbreakers at my head and I was chasing them, and if I would have caught them, they would have been, I would have beat the shit out of them, but I actually couldn't catch them. But that day I decided this isn't worth it. And it took that long. I wanted to fit in so badly. I felt like I needed their approval so badly that I put up with that abuse. And there came a point where I just said, that's enough. And I just finally let go of trying to fit in with them. And literally the minute I did that, the second I did that, and I left their house and went home, they changed. Their attitudes changed. And they followed me home and they apologized. And the funny thing was that they never bullied me after that. And what I realized was that I was part of that dynamic. So I had a responsibility in that dynamic. It wasn't just them. They had their responsibility for what they were doing, but they were also reacting off of my state of being. So this brings up a principle that everything is that we play a part in everything. Our state of being, who we are being, plays a part in how others treat us. That we always have some responsibility, that we always have an effect in the dynamic. And what I've discovered through reading lots of books on psychology, philosophy, spirituality over the last 20 to 25 years was that they wanted me, a part of them wanted me to grow. And the growth was for me to come out of that dependency and that need for approval. So by them bullying me, it actually pushed me to grow enough to reject them, to let go of wanting their approval. So, and subconsciously, they could sense that. They could sense that I had a weakness, and that weakness was showing up, and it was me not accepting myself. It was me not fully appreciating myself, and also me needing that external validation. And so they actually benefited me. And this brings up another principle that everything that happens to you, every single thing that happens to you can benefit you. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it's challenging, but that's only half of the picture. The other half is the benefit and service that it gives you, the growth that it gives you, the empowerment that it gives you. So now let's go back to my lack of belief in myself when I was in grade 2. So in that moment, I created a limiting belief about who I was. And that affected my behavior. That affected the amount of effort and dedication I put into school. But the funny thing is in grade 8, almost the exact same thing happened. So I was just working away, messing around, barely paying attention. And I was in a grade 8 and grade 9 split. And the kids in grade 9 seemed a lot older than me, even though I was in grade 8, but they were just physically more mature. So we kind of looked up to them. And one of the kids said, copy off of Doug, he's smart. And this was like one of the most popular kids. And, he was dating one of the more popular cute girls. And so when he said that, it made a huge impact on my self-image. And in that moment, I chose to perceive myself as smart. I chose to accept that belief. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll take that. And I decided to make that into a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where I believe it and I'm going to start making it true, making it real. So I started paying more attention. I started working harder. I started doing my homework. I actually started trying. And as I started to try, I had a couple other realizations. One was I was only a few years away from being 18, and I was going to be on my own. My mom wasn't going to take care of me. My parents didn't have any money to take care of me, so I was going to have to fend for myself. And I was like, okay, I better make this school thing work. I might as well. And so I started working. I started learning, studying. And what I realized is that I was placing all of the responsibility for learning on my teachers. If they were a bad teacher, then I obviously couldn't learn it. Oh, but what I realized was, what? Most of this stuff is self-taught. You read the textbook, you do the homework, and you figure shit out on your own. And when I realized that I could just teach myself, that's when things really shifted for me. And I started to teach myself things. And then the biggest moment that really helped was when in grade 9 at the last day of school, I actually slept in that morning. There was an assembly, and it was an awards assembly, and they were like giving out the awards, and I showed up late for the assembly and sat at the back of the bleachers with my friends where we all hung out, and it was like, oh, most improved student, Doug Spence, come get your award. Okay, so I was like over 80%. That was most improved student overall. Okay, cool. Oh, most improved student in math. Most improved student in English, social studies. So I went back and forth to the back of the bleachers like 5 times to collect my awards. And in front of the whole school, after that day, everybody began perceiving me as smart, as intelligent. And I chose to just go with it. And so this social influence does have a huge impact on us. And I talk about this in my community. I made a module about the invisible influence of our social influences. And that can be negative or positive. So I decided to take on this positive social influence at the time. And I started studying really hard. I upgraded my math. I upgraded my English, my social studies. I did 5 years of math in 3 years. I did 4 years of English in 3 years. And my goal at the time was to become an engineer. That just sounded like the most, successful kind of thing I could do at the time. But after high school, I decided to take a year off. And after high school, other things got in the way. I was very lonely. Like I really wanted a girlfriend. And I had my heart broken near the end of it was after grade 12. But even before that, I was trying really hard just to get a girlfriend. And that meant going to the bars, drinking, and just trying to meet people and stuff. And it failed horribly because I was super desperate. And, I think part of this came from the not having a father, just wanting that validation from a woman. So a year goes by, 2 years go by, and without any success. And it makes obvious sense now because I wasn't in the right mindset. I was in the mindset of I want, I need. And until I finally sat down and asked myself, what do I have to offer? When I realized what I had to offer, everything changed for me. It, first off, made me recognize my value to a woman. And it made me recognize that not every woman is going to value those things about me. Not every woman values intelligence and whatever it was I had to offer at the time. Some women want someone who's, more good looking and buff and who's the alpha male of the group or whatever. So those are not things that I had to offer. So it helped me to become more objective. And it helped me to recognize that the people who reject me, the women that reject me, are not rejecting me. It's just, they're just rejecting the traits that I have to offer. And it's just not what they're looking for. So essentially, I didn't take it as personally. It was like it was more like it's just not a good fit. When you realize what you have to offer, and not everybody wants that, then you realize it just wasn't a good fit. And when you do meet the right person, they will recognize those traits right away. If they're looking for that, they will recognize that right away. And that's exactly what happened. So I met my future wife a couple of years later, and it was exactly like I explained, like she knew exactly what she wanted, I knew exactly what I wanted, and we just clicked. And the other thing was I needed to define more clearly what it was I wanted from a woman. And I wrote that down as well. So that's one principle as well, is knowing your value, knowing what you have to offer, and coming from a place of what do I have to give, rather than just what do I need, what do I want, what do I need, what do I want, right? If you come from that energy, you're just going to repel people. So I mentioned after high school that I got my heart broken, and that was like a weird relationship I got into out of neediness. And again, it was the universe and the laws of the universe teaching me how to be more self-loving, more independent, less needy. And I'm very grateful that happened, that she basically started cheating on me and just sort of led me on for a while. But what I learned at that time was, at that time I was working as a security guard. And this was in 1999 or to 2000, something like that. I discovered Buddhism on the internet. The end of suffering. I first saw it in an encyclopedia, the end of suffering. I was like, what the hell's that? I need that. It was Buddhism, and I'd never heard of Buddhism before, or what it was, and what the principles were. And so I started reading and learning about Buddhism, and that's when I discovered mindfulness. And that's when I learned how to pay attention to my thoughts and my feelings. and the connection between the thoughts and the feelings, and started to become aware of how thinking this thought creates this feeling. And it was good. It was really good. It was really good to gain that awareness. And it really became important with dealing with frustration and anger. I was feeling a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, a lot of blame. And it also helped that I was working a job all by myself from midnight till 8 a.m. And I was angry for 8 hours. And it was like, where am I angry at? There's no one here. There's, the relationship is over. Yes, I've been hurt, but the anger's still there. And what's causing the anger? And when you recognize that the thought is the cause of the anger, and you slowly begin to close the gap that I think this thought, I feel this feeling. I think this thought, I feel this feeling. And that time between the two, when that gets down to zero, when the thought and feeling synchronize, it's like it evaporates. You're like, I'm not gonna think that anymore. When there's no space between them, that's when the thought evaporates. And I was extremely lucky to discover that at the age of 18 or 19. And that also taught me about presence, being in the now. And everyone's familiar with the book, The Power of Now, which is an amazing book. And it was great. So I spent a lot of time being present, trying to stay in the now for at least a couple of years, always trying to be in the now. And I had a couple interesting experiences. Once I was on the train on my way to college, and I was being in the now, and I looked around at everyone's faces, and suddenly it was like I was able to take in all of the information on their faces. And I could see like 50 different faces all at once. And it was like all of the information was just downloading, unfiltered into my mind. And it only lasted about 3 seconds. But what I got from looking at those faces was fear. It was like everyone was in a state of mild fear. Like they were all worrying about something. And that was a very interesting experience. I've never had that happen again. And, but it was very cool. So I still struggled with my self-image. I knew I wanted to go to college and go to school. And instead of becoming an engineer, I decided I was going to go become a draftsman, a designer, a draftsman, because I love to draw. And, but going to the college, I remember going to the college that day and needing to apply, and I was doing everything by myself. And I was like, walked up, and there's this big facade. It looked like I was walking up to a castle. And I was just like, what am I doing here? I don't think I belong here. Like, I just felt so uncomfortable. But I had to just keep pushing through. And I went in and I got the application, and I almost missed the application date for that year. I would have to been off school for another year. If it hadn't been for one of my friends at the bar who walked up to me and said, Doug, what the hell are you doing? Why? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, why aren't you in school yet? I saw you work so hard through high school. Like, and then he's like, got mad at me, and then he like took off, and this was like 30 seconds. And then I was like, oh my God, he's right. Like, I need to apply. I need to get that application in. Just those few words made a huge difference in my life, in the whole trajectory of my life. And I almost didn't have the $250 to apply to the to the school, but somehow managed to scrape that up before the fall and apply, and I got in. And what I discovered was going to college was very unique in terms of the people I was surrounded by. It was a major change, major upgrade in a way. The people that were at college with me were intelligent, they had ambition, they had goals, and I just wasn't used to that. Other than, the goal was to, like, where are we going to get our next $20 to buy some 40s from? Like, so these people really, they were like me, much more like me in a way. Like, they had some ambition and they had positive outlook for their future. And where I was coming from, the neighborhood I was coming from, there was really none of that. Like, that was rare. Like, I'm the only one of my friends from high school, my close friends, that actually went to college. And so this took a lot. This took a lot of work on my self-image. And I really want to thank the author Maxwell Maltz, who wrote Psycho-Cybernetics. Because, during that time that I took 2 years off before going to college, I was doing sales jobs and I was reading a lot of self-help books, and one of them was Psycho-Cybernetics. And in that book, he teaches you to relax your body, get fully relaxed, to record yourself on a cassette tape, and to play it back, and to picture yourself being and doing and feeling the way you would love to be. And the author of Psycho-Cybernetics was a surgeon, and he noticed that some of his patients, after surgery, even if the surgery went really bad, they would walk out of his office with confidence. They'd be a completely different person. When after they've healed up, they'd have their confidence back. And then there were other people who their surgery went perfect, they looked beautiful, but they still didn't have confidence. They still didn't have a high self-image of themselves. And so he realized that the self-image is internal. It has nothing to do with what's going on outside of us. So whether we have a missing tooth, a scar on our face, or whatever, it's all about our internal self-image. So he really helped me to close my eyes, get in a meditative state, and to start picturing myself being and doing the things that I wanted to do. And one of the main things was to be able to speak clearly and confidently, and just interact with people in a confident way. And I did that. And so crossing that threshold to college was definitely made possible by doing that mindset work, by doing that visualization and seeing myself the way my ideal self. And so yeah, that is a great book, by the way. He talks about the success mechanism. And the success mechanism means to focus on the goal and to ignore the negative feedback, basically. To just focus on where you need to go, like a missile. And a missile is constantly correcting course. So by constantly correcting course, you eventually land at your target. So it's a great book. It's one of the classic self-help books. So I highly recommend that. And then, so after that, I made it through college, got my first job, and I finally started making like some decent money. So no more of these crappy sales jobs or jobs from the back of the newspaper. And I had a steady job where I could learn and I could keep growing. And I became a draftsman. I learned how to use AutoCAD. And this was in 2003 when I graduated. And it was great for about 2 years. And I would learn. I learn. I got really good at my job. And at about the 2-year mark, which is how long it took to get good at that job, I started getting bored. I started getting frustrated, and I wanted to change. So I decided to, it was environmental work. So I decided to ask, could I go out in the field? You know, do what the engineers are doing. Go out in the field, take samples, and bring them back and drill and excavate and, you know, tell the heavy duty equipment guys what to do and where to dig. And I did. They let me do that. And it was crazy because they moved me from the drafting corner to the area where all the engineers sat. And there was me, you know, where was I now? 24, 25 years old, sitting around a bunch of engineers thinking, whoa, I feel out of place again. But I didn't let that scare me. It made me nervous. I'm definitely going to admit that. But what I realized was I'm surrounded by so many intelligent people that I will succeed. I can talk to them. I can ask them for help. There's just so many intelligent people around me that I'll be okay. And it did work out. One of the hydrogeologists took me under his wing, and I learned with him for 2 years. And in exchange, I actually taught him Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and we became really good friends. And again, I had to believe in myself. I had to believe that it was possible. I had to upgrade my self-image again. But unfortunately, after 2 years, I got bored again. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? Why do I get bored every 2 years? Like, these guys have been doing the same job for 30 years. How is it that I need to change again? And around that time, I did one of the personality tests. I found a book called Strength Finder 2.0 in the business and self-help area. Because, you know, I love that stuff. So Strength Finder 2.0 will teach you what your subconscious strengths are. And my number one at the time was learning. And they don't really change. They just kind of rearrange. So my top 5 strengths at the time was learning. My number one was learning. And I was like, oh, okay. So I love the learning part, but once that learning curve slows down, that's when I need to change. So what I realized was I need to find work or an industry where the learning really never stops. And it would have been good to know this, you know, before going into my path, into my career. So I recommend that to people when I'm doing career coaching is take 5 personality tests, at least 5. And it will uncover all of the subconscious things that you love to do. It will uncover who you are, what you like, so that you can start designing your life and your career around those things. Because me going into engineering was more of a overcompensation to prove to myself that I could do something technical, that I could do technical work. And it turns out that I'm more suited to do coaching. And so my other strengths are strategy and futuristic and developer, which means I see potential in people and I love to develop it. And relator, I love getting to know people deeply and working with them very closely. So I started doing, so I kind of was feeling a little trapped, feeling a little stuck in my career. And I jumped around a bit. I would change from environmental work. I kind of jumped around a bit. I would change from environmental work. I did some structural work, and I kept moving to different types of work in the engineering field. And at the same time, I was training in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I trained for 7 years, and I got to purple belt, and I was a purple belt for at least 2 years. And this was in the 2000s, before jiu-jitsu became very popular. And during that time, I also discovered that, the learning was a big part of why I loved it. And the coaching and the strategy. But whenever it came to a competition, I would perform very badly. I wasn't able to keep my cool. My nerves took over. I wouldn't sleep for 3 days before the competition. I was worried about what my sensei, my coach would think if I let him down. There was all this baggage in my head that messed up my performance. And almost every competition I went to, I would get injured. And so that gave me more things to work on. I'm like, okay, what is going on here? Again, right? So what I realized was I was letting my mind drift. I didn't have a focus. I was thinking about the coach. I was thinking about the opponents. I wasn't thinking about what I'm there to do. What actions am I there to do? So I came up with a mantra. And it was exactly like it came from the principles that I learned about jiu-jitsu. So twist the joints the way they're not supposed to move. Okay, that's essentially what we're doing in jiu-jitsu. And then I'd say, make them tap. Use momentum, make them tap. Off balance him, make him tap. Get the control, make him tap. Block one side, make him tap. And this went on for, I think I had at least 2 to 3, 4 minutes of this. And so the next time I went to a competition, I would repeat this. I memorized it, obviously. And I would repeat this over and over in my head. And when my attention started to drift and look at the other opponent, oh, he looks like he's good, what he's doing. Nope, back, make him tap, use momentum, off balance him, etc. Make him tap, make him tap, make him tap. So I'm warming up, I'm doing jumping jacks, and this mantra is just repeating in my head over and over and over again. Right up to the point where we shake hands and we fight. And boom, I'm after the guy. And I just go and do my thing. And, 2 minutes in, he's tapping. Next guy, 2 minutes in, he's tapping. And somebody comes up to me after and she's like, oh, I knew you were going to win. And I'm like, really? Like, how? And she's like, you should have seen your face. I was like, oh, I had no clue how focused, how concentrated, determined I looked. I was just repeating that over and over in my head. So this lesson is about focus. This is about not letting your attention drift, to keep that focus laser sharp on what you are supposed to be doing, not letting it go and aim at the competition, not letting it drift over to the competition or to, what other people are doing or what your coach thinks or what other people think. It's like, what is your mission? Focus on the mission and don't let your mind come off of that for 1 second. And that has served me very well. There was another competition I went to. It was round robin. And round robin means everybody fights everybody. So I fought 10 guys that day and I lost, I think, 2 matches. And the reason that I lost one of them for sure was that I let my attention go for a split second. I'd already beat like 8 guys in a row. And the last guy, I was like, he's going to be easy. And that was my mistake. Because he was playing funny, he was talking, he threw me off. He gamed me pretty good there. And so he caught me in the guillotine, and I didn't even put up much of a fight, and because I think I just let myself get too proud and too cocky, and that was my downfall there. So I took my eye off the prize, even just for a second, and then it got me. The other guy that beat me, he was just too like 2 levels higher, 2 levels better than me. So he really deserved that win. That was a good one. So really tough opponent. So keeping your eye on the prize, not letting your attention slip, and that was a really big lesson for me. Then, when I was 28, I had to quit Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because my knee and my back were so injured that I couldn't even roll with white belts anymore. So my back would be hurting for a week afterwards. So I chose to quit, unfortunately, forced to quit. And there was a grieving process there. There was a grieving process where I was like, what am I going to do? This has been my passion, my obsession for years, 7 years. It's everything I thought about, wanted to learn about, everything that like made me feel like gave me self-worth, and I was like, what am I going to do? Now, this is a really important thing to understand, a universal principle to understand when it comes to grief. Because grief is one of the most difficult emotions for people to process because they don't understand the law of transformation. The law of transformation means that nothing is gained and nothing is lost. Everything is just changing form. So with the law of transformation, and I know I'm only talking about my sporting losses, but this applies, the same law applies for when someone dies, someone passes away, when you lose a loved one. So I had to define, what exactly do I miss about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? What exactly do I miss about that? And this can be used with people who have passed away as well. What exactly do you miss about them? Define it. So for me, it was the learning, it was the strategy, it was the coaching, and it was the predicting the future, looking into the future, imagining possibility, and relating with people one-to-one. Now, when it comes to your loved ones, it could be their sense of humor, their hugs, their kindness, their voice, their touch. It could be the sound of their voice. It could be their hands. It could be anything. It could be anything. Their laugh. And I had to figure out where can I express this within myself? Where can I express this learning, this coaching, this strategy? And for me, I chose at the time was business. I'm going to learn about business. I'm going to learn about making money, where I get to learn, I get to do lots of strategy. Maybe I'll get to coach people, but really I was trying to satisfy my desire for learning. Now, what I've learned since then, when it comes to grief of when you've lost a loved one, is that those traits that you miss about them, they emerge. They emerge somewhere, somehow, in another form. It could emerge from yourself. It could emerge from something physical, like a song, or nature, or a pet, or television show, or So whatever you were getting from the one person, you begin to get from the many. You start to see the transformation that the one has become the many. And this is the universal principle of the one and the many. Sometimes the many become the one. So if you're not in a relationship right now, you may be getting your needs met from the many, the friends, the family, the television, pets, entertainment. And then one day you'll meet the one, and then you get all of those same needs met through the one. So this is the law of the one and the many, and this is the law of transformation. So the idea is there is no gain or loss. There's only transformation. And this is something that only you can prove to yourself. And I can help you through coaching to help you discover the one and the many, the law of the one and the many, and to resolve any grief that you might have. And I've done this with people in the past, and it has been successful, and I've seen other coaches do it as well. It's part of the DeMartini method, and it's extremely powerful. It's extremely powerful for dissolving grief. Something that people spend decades holding on to, decades struggling with, can be resolved in an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, depending on the number of traits that you miss in that person. Sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's a little more. So that's the law of the one and the many. And that's how I became interested in business, and which evolved into being interested in marketing and psychology, which evolved into being interested in coaching. And this happened over, a period of 10 years. I would continually learn while I was working as a draftsman. So the cool thing about being a draftsman is you're using the right side of your brain. So at the same time, I could listen to audiobooks using the left side of my brain, depending on what I was working on, of course. But it allowed me to consume a lot of material, a lot of information from various authors about psychology and business and marketing and personal development. And that's basically the story of how I started becoming a coach. Now, there's a period in my life where I really resented the drafting and design work. And around this time, I was learning a lot from Dr. DeMartini's books. And one of the principles he taught was that everything is on the way, not in the way. You can choose to see things on the way, not in the way. So I was working at this job that I did not like. Let's just say I resented it. And I said, I could be learning about business right now. And I'm like, okay. And then he says in his book, find out how it's on the way. How is this on the way? And I was like, okay, let's do this. How is this on the way? How is this on the way? It took me a while, but I realized I'm in a business. I'm in a successful business. I could be learning. I see the CEO in the elevator every day. I see managers. I see how this business is structured. I'm literally in a business. I could be learning from within right now. And so I started to use the things to help me with my goals rather than resenting them, rather than just wishing I was doing something else, which wasn't getting me anywhere. So yes, I continued, and I read basically all of Dr. DeMartini's books. And I did end up taking 7 years off of work. And during the 7 years, I worked as a stay-at-home dad. Now, being a stay-at-home dad with 2 little kids was much harder than any job I'd ever done, including working in a factory, which was, 10 hours a day on an assembly line. And the thing is, when you're a stay-at-home dad, you don't get to nap, you don't get to take a break, you don't even get to go to the washroom by yourself. The kids need, attention 24/7. So one of the books that really helped me get through that was The Power of Now. I listened to that book at least 3 to 6 times. And chapter 3, the chapter on time, how time is an illusion, was always the one that really impacted me the most. But really, it's the kind of book you can just play at any point throughout the book, and it will help you. So one thing that really helped me, a mindset shift that helped me also, was to imagine myself 20 years in the future. Imagine that the boys were in their 20s and they were grown, and that if I could reverse time and come back to this moment, what would my attitude be like? And that really helped me to get present and to appreciate what I was doing, what I was getting to experience, and how that was serving me. And that really helped. That really helped me to just appreciate what I was getting to enjoy. And during that time, I could also learn more about coaching, mindset, and learn about universal principles, psychology. So again, I continued learning on my journey. And then it was time for me to get back to work 7 years later. So I went back into design and I continued learning. And at that time, I launched my website. I finally took action and launched my website after 15, 20 years of not really knowing what I wanted to do. And it took that long because I started in business, then I did marketing. And then when I was doing marketing, I realized I really just liked the weekly meetings with the entrepreneur. I really just liked helping them overcome their limiting beliefs. And I was like, why don't I just do that? I thought I had to build a website for them and a funnel and all that stuff. And I'm like, why don't I just coach them? But I still had a limiting belief that I wasn't qualified, that no one would pay me, that et cetera, et cetera. So I took myself through my own coaching. Again, I self-coached myself. Is it true? You're not qualified. Is it true? How do you feel? How do you react when you believe that? Well, you don't take action. You don't do shit. Okay, who would you be without it? I'd probably actually try something. I'd experiment and then reverse it. Are you qualified? Or you are qualified? Well, go back and look through your whole life and what you've dealt with and how you've overcome that. Of course you're qualified. And then I did the same process with people will not pay. And it took me about an hour to self-coach myself through this process. Once I realized that I was holding myself back with these limiting beliefs, I got to work. I built the website. I started finding clients. I started calling clients and having appointments and started getting work and started meeting with people and coaching them. So it made a huge difference in 1 hour of self-coaching. And I continued. I'm still working as a designer right now, and I'm coaching part-time. And I'm building my community, which is for whoever really, but entrepreneurs, content creators, business owners who want to develop more confidence, who want to grow themselves, overcoming limiting beliefs, who want to make these same shifts that I'm talking about. The same shifts that have helped me, that has served me. I love to share that with people. And so I became a DeMartini facilitator. I've done the training. It's a 5-day, 12-hour-a-day training. I've done that twice. I've helped Dr. DeMartini facilitate his 2-day events, once in Houston and once in Calgary. And I've seen the results that people get from using the DeMartini method, from creating these shifts. I remember a guy he was a veteran, and he felt shame for accepting his government payments. And so I coached him through that, and I helped him see the benefits to his girlfriend and to other people. And he was locked in a bias that he shouldn't be receiving handouts from the government. But when I showed him him receiving that money, I helped him to see it himself. I didn't show him. I just asked him the questions. He discovered he has risked his life for that money, that he deserves to receive that money. And he kind of had a little cry and he said, thank you. And he just let go of 20 years of shame. And the same thing happened with a woman who'd been holding on to shame for 30 years. 30 years. And it was about her cheating on her high school boyfriend. And she started dating this other guy. And so we looked at the benefits. This time we looked at how did that benefit her? And he ended up being 3 hours away. And she realized that she was just trying to take care of herself. She was just she wanted to get into a real relationship. She wanted to get married. She wanted to have kids, all of that. And this just wasn't going to happen with this other guy who was 3 hours away and wasn't that serious. But she hung on to this guilt for cheating on him for 30 some years. And again, she had a little cry and broke down. And it was amazing to see that weight come off of her shoulders. Now, there's another person that I helped whose father passed away, and I helped her to resolve some of the grief, the things that she missed about him, his voice and his hands, and to help her see that those things are still present in her life in a different form. And she thanked me for that. And I've seen other people, I've seen someone overcome the suicide of their son. I've seen someone overcome at least two people overcome some traumatic rape situations. So it's powerful. You can use these tools to shift your baggage, your trauma, and to help you to achieve your goals, to really help you live your life to the fullest. And you don't need to stay stuck and trapped and limited and in pain. There is so many ways to get yourself through these emotions so that they don't have to hold you back. So I'm very lucky to have learned these universal principles. I'm very lucky to be able to apply them to my life. And I use them every day. I use them in my own relationship. And I use them at work in my career. And I'm using them now for my business, for my coaching business. And I think that about brings us back to the present where, I'm here. I'm launching my community. It's basically launched. So there's some courses in there. There's more to follow. And we're going to do Zoom meetings where I will coach people, help them to expand who they are, what they're capable of, how they see themselves, help them to grow, and help them to overcome their limitations, their limiting beliefs. And, one thing that I've learned through this is anytime we perceive a limitation, anytime we perceive a limitation in ourselves, we're going to feel some kind of pain, some kind of suffering. It might be shame, it might be guilt, it might be fear, it might be anger. And also, whenever we perceive a limitation within others, we're also going to have a negative emotion, a painful emotion. I mean, we call it negative because it's painful. And we call the positive emotions positive because they're pleasurable and joyful. So the difference between the two in our perception is whether there's a limit or not a limit. And it's as if the emotion is a signal that's trying to tell us something. It's trying to help us to see that whenever we're perceiving a limitation, we're stuck in illusion. We're not seeing things the way that they actually are. We're not seeing the truth. We're not seeing reality. So I start to take this now. Every time I feel pain, I ask myself, where's my limitation? Anytime I feel sadness or disappointment or whatever it is, I'll be like, where's my limitation? Or anger or resentment or grief. These are all various forms of limitation, various ways that we create limitation in our minds. And this kind of is where things get a little spiritual, because the last couple of years, 4 years ago, I discovered a book called Journey of Souls. And Journey of Souls is written by a hypnotist. And he accidentally stumbled upon the life between lives, where essentially he says we begin to plan our life as a soul. We choose our parents, we choose the traumas that are going to happen to us, and we choose where we're going to live, or we choose everything. We basically make a plan for our soul, saying, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to have this adventure and I'm going to go see what it's all about. And then you get there and it's real. Up there, maybe everything is a higher frequency. Everything feels good. You want something, you just think of it and it's there. And you see things from the highest perspective. But down here, we see limitation, we see bias, we see black and white thinking. We have our limiting beliefs. But from the highest perspective, from the perspective of a soul that's been, thrown down here, placed down here to grow, given the opportunity to come here to grow, it's a lot different, right? So that's a lot of these questions now are designed to help us see things from the level of the soul, how this is serving you at the level of the soul. Even our worst traumas, even our most painful moments in life can serve us. Everything has a challenge and a support, has a positive and a negative, has a service and a disservice. It's not a service, it's not just a challenge or just a support. If you see the whole thing holistically, that it's both. It's pain and pleasure. It's challenge and support. It's both. And that's where we get the most growth. We don't get the most growth when we're 100% supported. We actually start to get weak when we're over supported. And we don't get the most growth when we're overly challenged. That's when we start to get stifled. But we can we can open our perception enough, we can open our awareness enough to see both sides, the challenge and the support. And then that's how we get the most out of those really tough situations that have happened to us. And that could be trauma, that could be a failure in business, that could be a loss of money, that could be a death of a loved one. All of these things will have a major downside, but the greater the challenge, you also get a great opportunity as well. So that's another one of the principles, universal laws. And when you think about it from, again, a spiritual point of view, if you wanted to design a reality that gave maximum growth to souls, wouldn't you want to make that reality perfectly balanced? Wouldn't you want that reality to have equal amounts of challenge and support? And if the universe truly is infinite and our reality truly is infinite, then infinity is going to be balanced. Infinity is going to have entropy and centropy. It's going to have life and death. It's going to have both sides. You can't have a lopsided infinity. And, you know, going back to the journey of souls, it does basically say that we are reincarnated, that we are infinite beings, and that we do continue to reincarnate either here or somewhere else. And we just continue to grow. We just continue to develop our souls. And the number one thing that we end up growing and developing is our capacity to love. And by experiencing pain, we develop empathy. We develop compassion. We grow through our pain. And I've also watched many near-death experience stories where people have gotten an injury, or they've basically their heart stopped beating for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and they've left their body. They've went to the other side. They've had a life review. They've met some angels and some guides, and then they get slammed back into their body. And they come back, and sometimes their whole perspective has changed. Sometimes they will grieve the love that they felt on the other side, but many times they will now see things from a much higher perspective, and they will see that during the life review that it wasn't the big things that mattered in their life. It was always the little things. It was those few little words, like the words my friend gave me at the bar where he said, "Doug, what the heck are you doing? Why aren't you in school yet?" Or just the tiniest the little words and phrases that, words of encouragement that make a huge difference in people's lives. These little small abilities, these little small ways of being more loving, more caring, more compassionate. There's more to talk about, there's more to say, but I think this is a good intro, and anybody who wants to get to know me more can definitely just join the community. We can have lots of good talks and get to know each other on a much deeper level. And I'd love to ask you those coaching questions and help you to see things from the highest perspective, help you to break through any limitations you might be feeling, and help you to get out of any pain that you might be feeling as well. So I look forward to seeing you in the community, and you'll find the link. It's in my bio. It's on YouTube. It's all over the place. You could Google my name, Doug Spence Coach. You'll find me. All right. Talk to you later, guys. Bye.